Ali, DawahFilms, this is Symbolic. Nick, how are you? You guys did a great job on these videos. Very rigorous thought. Excellent. I'm sorry I won't be able to return that rigor in the same measure. Let me apologize in advance for that. Great videos. In any event, let me start with an analogy. Let's say there's a group of people in a room, and someone walks in the room. They close the door, so there's no way to really test for empirical evidence in the other room. Let's push empirical testing aside. The person comes in the room and he says, "I believe there is a horse in the other room." And all the people in the room say, "Really? Well, why do you believe that?" And he puts forth his arguments. Well, I saw the horse, or somebody told me there's a horse, or it's necessary that there be a horse in the other room because of this proof, what have you. Now, among the people in the room, there will be various responses. Some people will just automatically believe. Maybe they know the man has a good reputation, who knows why, but they will believe. They may accept one of his arguments and say, "Yes, I believe, as you do now, that there's a horse in the other room." Other people may decide for some reason that they believe that there is no horse in the other room. These would be the positive atheists with regard to the horse. And they would say, "No, I do not believe there is a horse in the other room. I believe there is not a horse in the other room." And they may step forward and the two sides may debate. And there will be other people in the room who basically neither believe that there's a horse in the other room nor disbelieve. Now, they perhaps can be considered an audience to the debate. Maybe they do have a role, though, in the debate, a questioning role. Maybe they're considering arguments. Maybe they're presenting new arguments to say, "Hey, maybe we could figure this out if we try this argument." A sort of an interactive role. I don't know if you could call that a position. I don't know if there are debates with three positions or whether debates are by nature sort of digital. Maybe there should be trigital, but I don't know if you can characterize it as a position, but it's certainly a valid and tenable state to be in. Now, do they have the same rights as the participants who are battling it out? I don't know. I don't exactly know what the role is, but it's a really interesting question. And these, of course, are the negative atheists I'm speaking of. Now, it's also possible that the man walks in the room and says, not that there's a horse in the other room, which is sort of surprising, but he may say there's a horse with wings or a unicorn in the other room. Now, the response to the people in the room may be very different. In fact, the person could even say something absurd. They may say there's, let's use I know this is overused and it's often used to trivialize religious belief or faith, so I don't mean it in that sense, but it's a well-known example. Somebody comes in and says, "Well, there's a flying spaghetti monster in the next room." Okay, now the concept of the flying spaghetti monster is inherently absurd. Now, I'm not saying that the concept of a deity is inherently absurd. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just using an example as to how we reach degrees of certitude in response of people. This is an inherently absurd idea. So now the people in the room may actually start to question the guy who walks. They may start to question the sanity of the person who walks in the room, or they may just write it off and say, "I'm not even going to bother with this because this is just absurd." It's self-refuting, in fact, which is an interesting difference. Certain things are self-evident. We accept as self-evident. Most people accept as self-evident, and if they're pretty much universally accepted, we'll accept them. We'll use them as axioms. I would think maybe the opposite of that is something that is absurd, something that is self-refuting rather than being self-evident. Kind of interesting. On this entire question, I tend to think that the core of the problem is the difference between a negative and a complement. A complement embracing everything that is not within the negative, but an opposite being the exact polar opposite. And if you take the question or the phrase, God exists, and you negate it, you get one version. You get God exists, no, or I believe that God exists, no. You get a very comprehensive sort of complement to things. However, if you put the not around the word exists, I believe that God does not exist, then you get a much more limited scope. And what you have here is now the opposite belief, not the complementary set of beliefs, but a singular opposite belief. So in a way, we're dealing with a set versus a single opposite, and it sounds like you guys kind of want to limit the debate so that only the people with opposite views are arguing. And I don't know about guys like me. What do we do? I don't know, but we're not going to go away. We like listening to you guys. We like participating. I agree with you, however, that the sort of non-atheism viewed as atheism or non-theism is too broad. I think we need to tweak it. I mean, obviously stones don't count. So I think we need to tweak the phrase and say, if we want to tweak it and say that atheism is, or non-theism if you wish, is a lack of belief in those who are capable of belief, or capable of making a decision. Do we want to make it a question of decision? I don't know. It is not always, well, I agree with you that if something is immaterial, if we are asserting the nature of something is immaterial, we cannot expect empirical evidence to prove or disprove it. But there are other kinds of evidence, though, as you know. Logical proofs are evidence. Obviously, there are things beyond the material. I mean, there's numbers, there's mathematics. We do proofs in mathematics all the time, and those are non-material proofs and serve as evidence, and we develop corollaries, etc. So, yeah, I agree. In a sense, it's not fair to expect empirical proof. But some people, that's their personal standard. They want empirical proof. That not me, but many people are like that. Atheism, or what I'll call the weak atheism, is not a religion. It's not a belief, is what I'm trying to say. It is not a belief. It's the suspension of belief. We cannot say someone exerts the existence of something. It does not automatically exist because someone asserts that it exists, under the logic that, well, the fact that you're even listening to what I'm saying and thinking about the concept at all means that it exists. I mean, I can think of absurd things. I can think of the flying spaghetti monster, or a unicorn, a clam with wings, an oyster with wings, or something irrational. And that does not, I can think of those concepts. That does not mean that there is something existing that those concepts refer to. So what's at issue is whether or not God exists. So it does not mean that claiming God does not exist, or questioning whether God exists, it does not mean that that the foundation of that is a belief in the object, the existence of which is asserted. No, so it is not a belief. Now, strong atheism will assert a positive belief that God does not exist. That is a belief, and can actually be a dogma. And I don't know if you could build it into an actual religion. I don't think so. It doesn't meet my full definition of religion, but it is a belief, and I think that they probably should be prepared. If they want to debate, they should be prepared to bring forward arguments. There's a little trick in there I'm not sure about, because what they're asserting is the truth of a negative statement. So I'll have to consider the answer may be really more subtle than that. What do I have here? No sufficient empirical evidence. Certain irrational things are positive. I mean, art processes are positive. Intuition, positive. Some things that are irrational are positive. Now, when we talk about evidence and we talk about reaching a reasoned conclusion, then we want evidence of various sorts, not necessarily empirical evidence, but we do want evidence. And I think here we have a concept of irrational and non-rational, just like we have the concept of atheism and theism. We're into the opposite versus the complement. But I don't believe that it is irrational to believe in the existence of a deity because there is no evidence. Is evidence the core of rationality? I would think not, because we have mathematics, and there's no quote-unquote evidence for mathematics. We start with self-evident axioms and move from there. But is there evidence of mathematics? Is there evidence of beauty? Is there evidence? I don't know. Yeah, the weak atheist, negative atheist, whatever you want to call it. I don't think they have a burden of proof because they are not asserting anything. They're, now if they assert something in the positive, they should be prepared to come with something. Um, so, what is self-evident? It is the opposite of self-evidence. Self-refuting absurdity. Is absurdity the opposite of self-evident? I don't know. I'm very fond of the absurd. I've become more fond of it. Absurdity and meaning fascinate me. I tend to be surrealistic in that regard. I think there's a lot of beauty that can be in the absurd.